Growing up in suburban Denver, Colorado, I learned early that being invisible was my default setting in my own home. My name is Ethan Matthews, and I'm 34 years old now. For most of my life, I carried the weight of being the son my father never wanted. When my mother died during childbirth in 1991, something in Victor Matthews died with her. He looked at me and saw only the reason she was gone. But when my cousin Carson Drake came to live with us after his father's death when I was 8, suddenly, my dad discovered he could love again. Just not me. Carson was also an orphan, but somehow that made him worthy of my father's affection while my motherless state made me a burden. The difference was stark and painful. Every report card I brought home with straight A's was met with a grunt and a "good job, son," that felt rehearsed and hollow. When Carson scraped by with C's and D's, my father would beam with pride, saying things like, "He's been through so much and look how he's trying. That's real character right there." I spent my teenage years working twice as hard for half the recognition, watching my cousin coast through life on a wave of unearned privilege and my father's misplaced guilt. The inequality wasn't subtle. It was a daily slap in the face that shaped everything about our household dynamics. When Carson wanted the latest PlayStation in 2006, Dad drove straight to Best Buy and dropped $400 without blinking, treating it like Carson deserved the world. When I asked for help buying textbooks for my advanced placement classes, I was told that hard work builds character, and I should get a job like every other kid my age. So I did. While Carson played video games and posted on MySpace about his latest gadgets, showing off to friends about his awesome uncle, I was flipping burgers at McDonald's after school and stocking shelves at Walmart on weekends, coming home exhausted while Carson lounged in the living room. The pattern was so consistent it became predictable. Carson needed new clothes for school. Dad would take him shopping at the mall and come back with bags from expensive stores. I needed new shoes because mine had holes. I was handed $40 and told to find something that lasts. Carson wanted to join the soccer team. Dad paid for registration, equipment, and never missed a game. I made the honor roll 3 semesters in a row. I got a pat on the head and keep it up. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The real slap in the face came during my senior year of high school in 2009. I had worked my ass off to get accepted to the University of Colorado Boulder with a partial academic scholarship that covered about 60% of my costs. I needed $15,000 to cover the remaining tuition, room and board, and living expenses for my first year. When I approached my father, sitting in his home office reviewing bills on a Sunday evening, I felt hopeful for the first time in years. Surely this was different. This was my future we were talking about, my chance to break the cycle and build something real. "Dad, I got in to see you Boulder," I said, holding my acceptance letter like a trophy. my hands actually shaking with excitement. I got a partial academic scholarship, but I need help with the rest. It's 15 grand for the first year, and then I can probably get more financial aid after that. He didn't even look up from his paperwork. Ethan, you're 18 now. Time to learn what the real world is like. If you want something, you work for it. I'm not running a charity here, and college isn't guaranteed to anyone. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I persisted. Dad, this is college. This is my future. I've worked for everything else, but this is different. No, son, it's not different. Life's hard, and the sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. Those words echoed in my head for weeks, but what happened 3 months later nearly destroyed me entirely. I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break at Walmart in August 2009 when I saw Carson's post that changed everything. There he was, standing in front of the University of Denver's main campus building, arms spread wide with a caption that read, "Thanks, Uncle Vic, for making my dreams come true. 4 years at DU, here I come. Can't wait to start this new chapter. Blessed. Family first. Dreams come true." The post had dozens of likes and comments from relatives congratulating him. My blood ran cold as I read through them, each one a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My hands were shaking as I immediately called my father from the parking lot behind Walmart, my voice barely controlled. "Dad, did you just pay for Carson's college tuition?" There was a pause, and I could hear the TV in the background. "Carson needed help, Ethan. He's been through a lot, losing his father and all. The University of Denver is expensive, but he deserves a chance to make something of himself." "How much?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That's between Carson and me, son." I did the math later that night, researching tuition costs on my laptop. The University of Denver's tuition was $38,000 a year in 2009. With room, board, and expenses, my father had just committed to over $150,000 for Carson's education, while telling me that $15,000 would teach me too much about handouts. The hypocrisy was staggering, but what made it worse was that Carson had barely graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA. He was only getting into DU because it was a private school that accepted anyone who could pay. No academic merit required. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks between 2 jobs, McDonald's during the day and the warehouse at night, trying to save money for community college classes. My grades had been good enough for a 4-year university, probably even better schools than DU, but I was stuck taking remedial courses at Front Range Community College because that's all I could afford. Every night I'd come home exhausted from my shift at the warehouse, muscles aching, only to see Carson posting Facebook updates from dorm parties and campus events, living the college experience I'd dreamed of since I was a kid. The contrast was brutal and constant. While I was studying for my general education classes at community college, Carson was posting photos from spring break in Cancun. While I was working double shifts to afford textbooks, he was joining expensive student organizations and social clubs. The social media posts were like salt in an open wound. Carson at Broncos games with friends, Carson at concerts, Carson living the life I should have had if merit mattered more than favoritism. The breaking point came during my second semester at Front Range in spring 2010. I had managed to save up enough money to take a full course load. 5 classes that would have put me on track to transfer to a 4-year school eventually. But then my car broke down. A 2001 Honda Civic with over 180,000 miles that I'd bought for $2,500 with money I'd saved from working since I was 16. The transmission was completely shot, and 3 different mechanics gave me the same estimate, $3,500 to fix it. I didn't have it. I had exactly $800 in my savings account, and that was supposed to cover my textbooks and gas money for the semester. I went to my father one more time, not asking for a handout, but offering to sign a promissory note for the repair costs, complete with interest and a payment schedule I'd calculated down to the penny. "Dad, I know you don't believe in helping me out, but I'm willing to put this in writing," I said, showing him the legal document I'd printed from the library computer. $3,500 for the transmission repair, and I'll pay you back $50 a month with 4% interest. I just need my car to get to work and school, or I'll lose everything. He was watching TV, some rerun of NCIS, and didn't even mute it when I walked in. "Ethan, we've been through this. You need to figure things out on your own. Maybe take the bus for a while, build some character." The bus. The nearest bus stop was 3 miles from our house, and the route to both my work and school would take over 2 hours each way with transfers. It was completely impossible with my work schedule. But that very weekend, I watched through my bedroom window as my father signed papers for Carson's brand new Honda Accord, a $20,000 gift for finishing his freshman year with a 2.1 GPA, just barely avoiding academic probation. That moment broke something inside me permanently. I dropped out of community college that semester. I couldn't afford the classes without my job, and I couldn't keep my job without reliable transportation. The bus schedule made it impossible to maintain the 50-hour work weeks I needed to survive. Instead, I threw myself into work completely, picking up every available shift, working 7 days a week, saving every single penny. I moved out of my father's house in late 2010 and into a tiny studio apartment in a rough part of Denver, sharing the space with cockroaches, broken heating, and the constant sound of sirens. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was living in a place where I wasn't reminded daily of my worthlessness, where I didn't have to watch someone else get everything I'd worked for. For the next 7 years, I lived like a monk. No social life, no vacations, no luxuries whatsoever. Every dollar went toward building something my father said I'd never have: a future. I got my real estate license in 2012 and started selling houses during Denver's post-recession housing recovery. The market was brutal, but I was hungrier than anyone else. I was hungry in a way that Carson never could be, because I'd actually known what it felt like to have nothing, to be nothing in your own family's eyes. While Carson was posting spring break photos from Cancun and summer trips to Europe, all funded by my father's endless generosity, I was working 16-hour days and sleeping in my office to save on rent. I lived on ramen noodles and energy drinks, wore the same 3 thrift store suits until they fell apart, drove a beat-up Honda until the wheels fell off. The real estate market was good to me, but only because I was willing to work harder than anyone else. By 2017, when I was 26, I owned a small property management company with 8 employees. By 2021, I had expanded into commercial real estate and was pulling in over $250,000 a year. I bought a house in Greenwood Village, a nice suburban area south of Denver. I drove a Tesla Model 3 and could afford custom suits from a tailor downtown. I had built everything from nothing, brick by brick, and I had done it completely alone. I hadn't spoken to my father in 14 years when his name appeared on my iPhone screen on a Tuesday morning in March 2024. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail like I had with his previous attempts to reach me over the years. But something in my gut told me this call was different. His voice was different, smaller, defeated in a way I'd never heard before, stripped of the authority and certainty that had defined him my entire childhood. "Ethan, it's your dad. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to see you. Can you come over? It's important. Please." That "please" caught me off guard. Victor Matthews had never said please to me in my entire life. There was something in his tone that made me agree, though I couldn't explain why. When I pulled up to my childhood home in my Tesla the next day, I noticed immediately how run down everything looked. The lawn was overgrown with weeds, the paint was peeling off the siding, and my father's 2016 Ford F-150 had a dent in the front bumper that looked like it had been there for months. The house that had once been the pride of the neighborhood now looked abandoned, neglected. My father answered the door looking like he'd aged 15 years in the 14 since I'd seen him. His hair was completely gray now, thin and unkempt, and he'd lost at least 30 pounds from what was already a lean frame. The confident, stubborn man who'd raised me was gone, replaced by someone who looked afraid of his own shadow. He was 65 years old but looked closer to 80, moving slowly and carefully like his bones hurt. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing toward the living room with a trembling hand. The furniture was the same, that old brown leather couch, the coffee table with ring stains from years of use, but everything felt different, smaller, sadder. The family photos that used to line the mantel were gone, probably sold. I know this is awkward, but I didn't know who else to call. "Carson won't return my calls." He started talking, And the story that unfolded was better than any revenge I could have planned myself. After Carson graduated from DU in 2013 with a business degree he'd barely earned, graduating with a 2.1 GPA after my father hired tutors and paid for extra classes, Dad had doubled down on his investment. He'd used his retirement savings, his pension, even a second mortgage on the house to fund Carson's endless stream of startup ideas and business opportunities. First, there was the food truck business in 2014. My father invested $40,000 in a gourmet burger truck that Carson was going to operate in downtown Denver. It lasted exactly 4 months before Carson got bored and abandoned it in a parking lot, where it was eventually repossessed. Then came the cryptocurrency trading venture in late 2017. Carson convinced my father that he could turn $50,000 into millions by trading Bitcoin and Ethereum. Instead, Carson lost the entire investment in 3 weeks during a market crash, right before the big surge that would have made them rich. The drop shipping company in 2018 was perhaps the most ridiculous. Carson spent $30,000 setting up an online store that was supposed to sell fitness equipment imported from China. He never shipped a single product, spending most of the money on a fancy office space and marketing materials for a business that existed only on paper. But the real killer was the restaurant. In 2019, Carson had convinced my father to invest everything, and I mean everything, into an upscale steakhouse in Reno, Denver's trendy River North Art District. Carson had presented a detailed business plan, complete with projected profits and market analysis that looked professional, but was completely unrealistic. The initial investment was $250,000, but cost overruns, Carson's expensive tastes, and his complete lack of business sense pushed it to over $400,000. He wanted everything to be perfect, my father said, his voice barely above a whisper. Custom furniture from Italy, a sound system that cost more than my car, imported steaks that cost $60 a pound. I kept writing checks because he said it was an investment in quality, that we'd make it all back in the first year. My father had liquidated his entire 401k, borrowed against his life insurance policy, taken out credit cards, and even sold my mother's jewelry collection, pieces that had been in her family for generations, to keep funding Carson's dream restaurant. The place was supposed to be called Drake's Prime, a name that made me sick to my stomach. The restaurant failed after 10 months, my father continued, tears forming in his eyes. Carson said it was because of COVID when the lockdowns hit in March 2020, but the truth is he was never there. He hired managers to run everything while he traveled around Europe with his girlfriend, posting about it on Instagram like he was some kind of celebrity chef. The place was hemorrhaging money from day one because no one was actually managing it, and Carson was spending money on personal expenses using the business credit cards. I sat there listening, feeling a mix of satisfaction and disgust wash over me. The same man who wouldn't lend me $3,500 for a car repair had given Carson over $600,000 to play entrepreneur over the course of a decade. "Where's Carson now?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. My father's face crumpled completely. "He moved to Los Angeles in late 2020, said he needed a fresh start, away from all the negativity and family drama. He blamed me for the restaurant failing, said I didn't support his vision properly. He hasn't returned my calls in over 3 years. I think he's blocked my number, blocked me on social media too." The picture became clearer as my father continued talking. He was broke, completely, utterly broke. The house was in foreclosure proceedings with the bank scheduled to seize it in 60 days. He owed the IRS over $80,000 in taxes and penalties from his early 401k withdrawals. His credit cards were maxed out with minimum payments he couldn't afford, and debt collectors were calling constantly, sometimes a dozen times a day. At 65 years old, he was facing bankruptcy and homelessness, with no retirement savings, no assets, and no one to turn to. "I made mistakes, Ethan," he said, "and for the first time in my life, I heard my father admit he was wrong about something important. I was so focused on helping Carson because I thought he needed it more. I thought you were strong enough to make it on your own, that you didn't need me. I thought Carson was fragile, that he'd fall apart without support. I see now that I was wrong about everything." He looked up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "I know I don't deserve to ask, and I know I failed you as a father, but I need help. I'm about to lose everything. The bank is foreclosing in 60 days, and I don't have anywhere to go. You're the only successful person in the family now, the only one who made something of himself." I sat in that familiar living room, looking at the man who had shaped my entire life through his rejection, and felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just emptiness. For 34 years I had carried the weight of wanting his approval, of trying to prove I was worthy of his love and attention. Now, seeing him broken and desperate, I realized that his opinion had never mattered at all. "Dad," I said calmly, my voice steady for the first time in his presence, "do you remember when I asked you for $15,000 for college back in 2009? He nodded slowly, looking uncomfortable, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his worn shirt. "Do you remember what you told me? You said you weren't running a charity, that I needed to learn what the real world was like. You said I should work for what I wanted. That college wasn't guaranteed to anyone." I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. "How much money did you give Carson over the years, total amount?" My father's shoulders sagged under the weight of the question. "About $600,000, maybe closer to 700 when you count everything." "But Ethan, that's different. Carson needed what?" I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "He needed a free ride through college while I worked at McDonald's and stocked shelves at Walmart. He needed a new Honda Accord while I took the bus because my transmission was shot. He needed $700,000 to play pretend businessman while I built a real company from nothing. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. My father looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him, and I felt the final pieces of my childhood resentment crumble away. He wasn't the powerful, intimidating figure who had rejected me. He was just a broken old man who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences of decades of favoritism and poor judgment. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know I failed you. I know I chose wrong every single time. I see that now when it's too late to fix any of it. But please, Ethan, I'm your father. I need help." I stood up from the couch and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown yard where I'd played as a child, desperately trying to get this man's attention, performing tricks and showing off accomplishments that he never acknowledged. "You know what's funny, Dad? For years I fantasized about this exact moment. I imagined you coming to me, broke and desperate, begging for help. I thought it would feel like victory, like vindication for everything you put me through." I turned back to face him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "But you're not my father, not in any way that matters. A father protects his children, supports them, believes in them even when they stumble. You did all of that for Carson, every single day for 20 years, but never once for me. You weren't my father. You were just a guy I lived with who happened to share my DNA." His face went white, and I could see the reality of his situation hitting him fully. "Ethan, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm begging you. I have nowhere else to go." "They weren't mistakes, Dad," I said, pulling out my phone. "Mistakes are accidental. What you did was make a choice over and over again for 20 years. You chose Carson every single time. When I needed school supplies, you chose Carson. When I needed help with college, you chose Carson. When I needed a car repair to keep working and going to school, you chose Carson. You made your priorities crystal clear. I was never one of them." I opened my banking app and showed him the screen, watching his eyes widen at the numbers. "You see this? This is my account balance. I could pay off your house, your debts, everything you owe to the IRS and the credit card companies, and still have enough left over to retire comfortably tomorrow. I built this empire from nothing, sleeping in my office, eating ramen noodles for dinner, because you taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that I can't depend on anyone but myself." My father's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment he looked like the broken child he probably was inside. "Then you'll help me? You'll save the house?" I put my phone away and headed toward the door, my Tesla keys already in my hand. "No, Dad, I won't help you. You taught me that family doesn't help family, that people need to work for what they want, that handouts create weakness and destroy character. Those were your exact words, your deeply held values that you applied to me every single day of my childhood. I'm just following the example you set. But I'm your father, he called after me, desperation creeping into his voice. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob, and turned back one final time. No, you're not. Carson was your son. I was just the kid who lived in your house and reminded you of your dead wife every time you looked at me. The difference is, Carson turned out to be exactly what you raised him to be. Someone who takes everything and gives nothing back. Someone who disappears the moment things get difficult. But I turned out to be something better than either of you ever imagined possible. I walked out of that house and never looked back. 6 months later, in September 2024, I heard through a distant relative that my father had lost the house to foreclosure and moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a government-subsidized senior living complex in Aurora, surviving on Social Security and food stamps. Carson never came back from California. As far as I know, they never spoke again after that final blocked phone call. I wish I could say I felt guilty about not helping him, but the truth is, I felt liberated. For the first time in my life, I understood that my worth had never been determined by his opinion or his approval. I had spent decades trying to earn love from someone who was fundamentally incapable of giving it, and his rejection had actually been the greatest gift he ever gave me. It forced me to become strong, independent, and self-reliant in ways that Carson, with his endless safety net, never could be. Today in 2025, my real estate empire is worth over $8 million and growing every quarter. I'm married to an incredible woman named Sarah who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide or what family I come from. We have a 2-year-old daughter named Emma, who will never doubt for a second that she is loved, valued, and cherished. She'll never know what it feels like to be invisible in her own home. I've built the life I always dreamed of, not despite my father's rejection, but because of it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's living well and letting the people who hurt you face the natural consequences of their own choices. My father invested everything in the wrong son, and he got exactly what he paid for. Meanwhile, the son he threw away, the one he considered worthless, became everything he never imagined I could be. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.